Fabio's crush and I were both kidnapped at the same time. The kidnappers couldn't get through to him, so they told us to contact Fabio ourselves. Whoever gets through to him first survives. I dialed his number 100 times, but Fabio didn't answer a single call. Yet when his crush made just one call, he answered immediately. He scolded me angrily. "You couldn't even protect Sofia, and now you've dragged her into this mess with you." Because of this, the kidnappers didn't dare harm Fabio's true love, but tormented me, his wife, instead. I was humiliated to the point of miscarriage, barely clinging to life. I felt hopeless and yearned for death. But the moment a 10-ton iron block was about to crush me, he went mad, screaming hysterically, "No! She's alive or dead. Why should I care?" I heard my husband Fabio's intermittent voice crackling through the phone. "But if you touch a single hair on Sofia, I won't let you get away with it." No sooner had Fabio spoken than the kidnapper strode toward me and delivered a brutal kick to my arm. I heard a sharp crack followed by intense pain. "Damn, I thought you two were so in love. Turns out you're not even as important as a stranger. What use is your life?" A stranger? I looked up at Sofia. She was no stranger. She was the one Fabio had cherished for 13 years. Still looking? Another kick. I couldn't hold back a groan, cold sweat instantly pouring down my face. I collapsed onto the ground in the abandoned factory, struggling to breathe through the pain. Because of Fabio's warning, the kidnappers couldn't hurt Sofia, so they vented all their anger on me. They wished they could kill me. It was clear Fabio heard what was happening. His voice paused. Then he said, "Think carefully and consider if you have the guts to face me head-on." Sofia, sitting beside me, remained silent, but the smugness in her eyes and the tilt of her brows spoke volumes. It was as if to say, "See? He chose me." Today, I had planned to attend a party alone. Just as I stepped out, Sofia stopped me. She begged me to give Fabio back to her, and before I could react, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself bound and dumped in this abandoned factory by the kidnappers. My hands trembled uncontrollably, and the pain in my abdomen kept urging me to seek help. I once suffered a miscarriage that left my body damaged and made it difficult to conceive. Now I was pregnant with a child less than 2 months along. This was the child I had longed for, the one I hadn't even had the chance to tell Fabio about. So when the kidnappers demanded I call Fabio, I did so immediately. They wanted me to beg him, and I begged. But what I didn't expect was that after calling him 100 times, Fabio didn't answer a single call. However, as soon as Sofia's number was dialed, he answered immediately. Sofia smugly said, "I told you I'm the one who's truly important to Fabio. If you insist on clinging to him without divorcing, you're just bringing this suffering upon yourself." Hearing this, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Yeah, I was the one asking for it. I met Fabio in college and I've liked him since then. At that time, I studied piano and became renowned in the industry. At the pinnacle of my career, I claimed an international grand prize. With the title of piano queen, I married Fabio in grandeur. Though he came from a wealthy family, I had my own career. Just like I imagined, we were perfectly matched, and our marriage was filled with love. He remembered what I liked to eat and would cook for me. He knew my throat was sensitive in the winter and would prepare medicine for me in advance. The businessman who dominated the corporate world would always pester me with sweet talk. "When we have a child, I'll love you both dearly," he'd say. But I never expected this happiness would last only 2 years. That all changed when his crush Sofia returned. The day Sofia returned to China happened to be our 2nd wedding anniversary. I had prepared early, wearing my favorite dress for the occasion. I wanted to tell him that I was pregnant. I was excited to see the surprised look on his face when he heard the news. But I spent the entire night waiting by the river, freezing and losing my senses. When I called him, I received a cold reply. "Oh, I forgot. I have to pick up Sofia, since she just returned. Don't you know to go home when you're cold?" Later, I developed a fever close to 40 degrees Celsius and passed out at home. The maid was in a panic, crying at my bedside, but he didn't even ask about me from start to finish. Even a wonton I made while sick were tossed to the receptionist at his company. I remained despondent until the day of my award ceremony. Fabio was sitting in the front row. After receiving the award, I smiled at him and tried to hurry over to share that our long-awaited child was growing in my womb. But as I stepped down the first step, I suddenly felt hands pushing me from behind. I tumbled down over a dozen steps. The person who pushed me kept pressing down on me. Fabio's eyes immediately turned red. Without regard for his composure, he flipped the table in front of him and charged toward me. My mind went blank. All I could think of was the child in my womb. The pain, overwhelming, suffocating pain. But when I saw him, it felt like I had found my anchor. I wasn't afraid anymore. I reached out to him crying, thinking he would lift me up, comfort me, and save me. But the next second, I watched as he walked right past me as if he hadn't seen me at all. Instead, he urgently scooped up the person who had pushed me. "Sofia, are you okay?" I turned my head to see the person who had just awarded me the prize. Her eyes were teary. "Fabio, my foot hurts. I think I twisted my ankle when I fell. But it seems this lady is more seriously injured." Fabio paused as if just realizing I had fallen too. But his expression was full of blame. "You can't even walk properly. You even dragged others into getting hurt with you. If you can't control yourself, don't wear such a long skirt. It's embarrassing." After scolding me, he picked up Sofia and rushed her to the hospital. I stood there frozen, watching his figure retreat into the distance. Yet he failed to notice how my black dress concealed the blood surging between my legs. She had only twisted her foot, but Fabio, I could feel it. The child inside me would never come back. In a daze, a crowd gathered around me. "She's bleeding, she's pregnant. Oh my God. Quick. Get her to the hospital." After the miscarriage, I considered divorcing Fabio. But he held me tightly, begging me not to leave him, unaware I had been pregnant. If he knew, he could never have treated me like that. He clung to me, trying to calm my shattered self, brushing away the strands of hair from my face, his gaze gentle yet firm. "Ferdinanda, we'll have another child. We will. I love you. I only love you." Since then, he seemed to return to the way he was 2 years ago. Everyone makes mistakes. And facing the crush I had adored for 13 years, I thought perhaps I should give him another chance. Fabio made a phone call, warning them repeatedly not to lay a finger on Sofia. The kidnapper, still not satisfied, asked, "Then what about your wife? Don't you care about her? Who were you planning to grab?" "Your wife." "Yeah, Sofia was just dragged into this for no reason." He paused, then continued, "I really don't know what she's good for. She couldn't even protect someone as fragile as Sofia." The kidnapper sneered, "Hurry up and get the documents from your safe. Don't call the police, or you won't see a single one of them." Then the kidnapper brought a bowl of water to Sofia. She sat there, clean and unscathed. Just like what Fabio once said in anger, "You're not even comparable to a single strand of her hair." I didn't have the same treatment. I could only curl up in a corner, clutching my arm, slowly losing the strength to blink. I didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe it was one night, maybe a full day, and night without food or water. I was exhausted, but I didn't even dare close my eyes to rest. Because once I closed my eyes, I might not wake up. In the long, terrifying silence, I could only hold my belly, whispering to the little life inside me. I said, "Baby, don't be afraid. Mommy will protect you." I said, "Baby, Mommy will be strong." I said, "Daddy will come for us." I was barely conscious when I was suddenly slapped awake. The kidnapper stood before me, sizing me up, then roughly wiped my face with his hand and burst into a perverted laugh. I trembled, sensing something was wrong, and instinctively shrank back. Don't touch me. No wonder Fabio would marry you. Take a closer look, you're actually quite decent looking." My breath quickened, and I looked at Sofia from a distance, her eyes full of disdain. I wanted to call for help, but before I could utter a word, a rag was thrust into my mouth and my hair was seized as they dragged me deeper into the factory. "Your husband doesn't even want you anymore. Who do you think will come to save you?" I don't know how I survived that assault. I only know that I screamed until my throat bled. My tears dried up. My hair was covered in dirt like a mop that hadn't been washed in ages. The kidnapper dragged me back to the same spot and tossed me back into the pile of paper boxes. The difference now was that my white dress was stained red with blood. Sofia glanced sideways at me, her expression full of disgust. Ugh, so dirty. I trembled at those words. The kidnapper rushed over and slapped Sofia hard. Don't think just because Fabio is protecting you I won't touch you. Keep running your mouth and I'll break your hands. Sofia shot me a fierce glare, but she fell silent. The kidnapper muttered impatiently, "Why is this taking so long?" Before he could finish, the door was suddenly kicked open with a loud bang. A beam of light flooded in, and as my eyes had grown accustomed to the darkness, I couldn't open them. For a moment I couldn't open my eyes and had no strength to speak either. But his voice, I would recognize it even with my eyes closed. "Sofia, are you okay?" It was Fabio. I forced my eyes open, looking toward the group of people standing in the light. I opened my mouth wanting to call him, but my hoarse voice only produced weak, helpless sounds. "Fabio, save me." He didn't come closer. The kidnapper shouted, "Stop. Where's the stuff?" Fabio paused, then said, "Give me the hostage first." "What if you go back on your words?" The kidnapper, clearly frustrated, replied, "The ones you want are fine." Fabio didn't respond. After a long silence, the kidnapper, unable to hold his impatience any longer, said, "Fine, but you can only choose one for now. Are you sure you didn't call the police? I'll warn you one more time, or else you won't save anyone." Fabio remained silent. A glimmer of hope rose in my chest. Did his silence mean he still cared about me? "Take Miss Sofia." Fabio didn't speak. But his assistant, who had been standing beside him, spoke up loudly. "Sir, you've been talking about Miss Sofia's safety this whole time. Let Sofia go first." Fabio's assistant was his dog, which meant his will was Fabio's. I watched as the assistant rushed forward, disregarding me still being held by the kidnapper, ignoring my bloodied body and my desperate cries for help. As he grabbed Sofia from the kidnapper, Fabio stood there the whole time just watching me without moving. As soon as Sofia was back in Fabio's arms, she cried bitterly, constantly trying to squeeze closer to him. But Fabio pushed her away, the one he had just rescued, with great difficulty. The kidnapper grabbed me and shouted, "She's back. Where's the stuff? Don't try any tricks." Fabio walked toward me, his hand reaching out as if he wanted to say something. But before he could speak, his assistant suddenly yelled, "You have no leverage anymore. We've already called the police. You'll face legal consequences." As soon as the words left his mouth, Fabio's eyes widened in shock. He whirled around to stare at the assistant with utter disbelief. The assistant responded indifferently, "Sir, Miss Sofia has been rescued. Do you truly intend to exchange company secrets for your wife?" The kidnapper, furious, grabbed my hair and screamed, "You dared to call the police? You dare call the police? Fine. Since I can't escape, I'll die, but I'll make sure you lead the way first." The rope was cut, and the iron block above my head plummeted down. With a sharp metallic smell, it lunged toward me. Fabio watched helplessly as the iron block fell toward me, his hand reaching out to grab me, but unable to stop it. His eyes were bloodshot as he screamed in desperation, "No, don't." The scenes before me stretched on endlessly, each moment elongating into eternity. I turned my head to look at Fabio. He was acting like a madman, yet all I saw in my eyes was profound relief. "It turned out that you never intended to save me. You wouldn't even bother lying to comfort me. All right, this is the end. Goodbye, Fabio. We'll never meet again." I lay there, warmth flowing ceaselessly from my body, spilling out until it filled every space around me like an enormous blossoming flower. A pair of legs knelt in the blood, slowly approaching me, as if handling fragile glass. He didn't dare touch me for a long while, only reaching out to trace my form with trembling fingertips. "Ferdinanda, Ferdinanda." He seemed out of his mind, endlessly calling my name. His voice was soft, yet soul-rending, seeping into my very marrow. I stared blankly at the ceiling, And when he called my name, I forced myself to look at him through the excruciating pain. I managed to force a smile, but as soon as I opened my mouth, blood came pouring out uncontrollably. He saw this and panicked, shaking his head desperately, bowing his head, begging me not to speak. I was wrong, I was really wrong. Ferdinanda, hold on a little longer, please. I can't live without you. He buried his face in my hands, tears streaming between my fingers. I blinked slowly, using my last bit of strength, and with a deliberate, decisive tone, I said, Fabio, I will never love you again. In that instant, he turned ashen, his gaze locking onto me with unprecedented despair. He wanted to say something, but then the sound of an ambulance came from behind. Pushed aside by everyone, Fabio was left on the outside as I gently closed my eyes. The noise around me was deafening. We can't move the iron block. Where's the saline? If the wait stays too long, toxins will accumulate in the tissues. If we move it, she'll die. Oh my God. Did she just have a miscarriage? Hurry. Don't worry about anything else. She's losing blood too rapidly. Get her back for emergency care immediately. Move. Everyone clear the way. My stretcher was just wheeled away. Fabio froze, his heart stopping when he heard the words. What do you mean? Just had a miscarriage? A young nurse panicked was pulled aside by him. Literally, don't disturb us, a life is at stake. The ambulance door slammed shut and sped off. Fabio, as if drained of strength, collapsed to his knees, staring blankly, but quickly came to his senses and rushed to follow. But the next second, his assistant urgently stopped him. Sir, since your wife has been sent to the hospital and is safe, we should comfort Miss Sofia, and there's also a meeting to attend. Fabio glanced at Sofia, who was still crying and demanding his comfort, then turned toward his assistant and kicked him hard. His gaze was deathly cold as he said, If anything happens to Ferdinanda, I won't spare you. With those words, he left Sofia behind, still crying, and without mercy turned to chase after the ambulance. Every inch of my body hurt, and it was precisely this pain that somehow kept me conscious. But I couldn't open my eyes. I could only hear the sounds around me. Nurses hurried past me, and one of them sounded startled. How could she lose so much blood? A younger nurse replied, the heavy object crushed her, and she just had a severe miscarriage. The fetus was less than 2 months along, and was abruptly expelled. There's severe internal bleeding. I can't even imagine what she just went through. Fabio was right beside me. I heard that he had run over a dozen red lights, speeding to keep up with the ambulance. The sound of his shoes hitting the ground echoed. His voice trembled with anxiety, but he kept repeating those phrases. Severe miscarriage, massive hemorrhage, what do we do about the hemorrhage? A nurse pulled his hand away. Don't hold on to the stretcher. Don't delay us here. We'll do our best to save her. What's her blood type?
A.
She's type A. Fabio's voice trembled with panic as he immediately interjected, stating my blood type. That was something the doctor had told him when I miscarried before. Damn it, there was a patient earlier who needed a blood transfusion. The hospital doesn't have enough type A blood. Quickly contact the central blood bank and see if we can get the blood bags delivered as soon as possible. Otherwise, it'll be critical. What do you mean by critical? Fabio suddenly shouted in panic. The nurse replied impatiently, It means she'll die. Can you please stop getting in the way? Who are you? His voice trembled, but was firm. I'm her husband. Her only family. There was a pause, and then the doctor said, Understood. The family should wait outside. As the automatic door closed, I heard Fabio's anguished scream. In truth, dying might not be so bad. My life has been so exhausting. I wish I could be reborn back into my mother's arms to finally find happiness. But against all odds, I survived. After prolonged efforts by the doctors and nurses, I somehow managed to cling to life. But life ahead will be even harder. During my days in the ICU, I remained unconscious until the day I was transferred to a regular ward when I truly regained consciousness. My body was covered in wires and treatment tubes. I slowly opened my eyes and shifted slightly. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone sleeping beside me. It was Fabio, his face pale, looking terribly exhausted and frail. I suddenly remembered the sounds I had heard while unconscious. The blood bags from the blood bank hadn't arrived on time. Fabio and I had the same blood type, and he nearly drained himself dry to donate blood for me. I lifted my gaze coldly and sneered at him. Didn't you abandon me? Wouldn't it be better if I just died? His lips were cracked and pale, his eyes full of regret. Don't say that, and don't be like this. He covered his face, sobbing in pain. I'll make it up to you. Trust me. As he said, he came to see me day after day. Even when he was in a wheelchair, he never missed a single day. Unfortunately, this affection came too late. When I had my miscarriage, when I was kidnapped, when I was humiliated, he didn't care. Countless calls, 1 or 100, repeatedly told me how laughable the love I once steadfastly believed in truly was. His eagerness came too late and only scorched the heart. I treated him as nothingness, yet he persisted in visiting daily, as if oblivious. Sometimes he brought beautiful jewelry, and sometimes the love letters he had written for me. What was laughable was that he had been the one to confess to me first and propose marriage. He had promised to love me forever. But sadly, a man's initiative doesn't guarantee eternity. Yet heaven gave me the chance to survive, and I was unwilling to endure any longer, unwilling to keep giving without anything in return. I need to make things clear with him. That day he came as usual, but this time he brought a bowl of pumpkin and millet porridge. Back in the orphanage, what I looked forward to most was a bowl of pumpkin millet porridge with sugar. His eyes sparkled as he looked at me. Ferdinanda, this is your favorite porridge. Please try it. For a moment, I seemed to see that bowl of wonton soup he had once given to someone else. I took that bowl of porridge and threw it straight into the trash can. Fabio looked shocked. What are you doing? I coldly stared at him with a sneer. Was he trying to move me? Unfortunately, I wasn't falling for it. He forced a smile. Don't like it? It's okay. I'll prepare something else for you. But just then the doctor came in to check on me. Fabio closed his eyes, wiped his tears, and stepped aside. The doctor's tone was light and comforting. Your husband's a good guy. He's been with you all this time. Actually, it's not the end of the world if you can't have children. Enjoy your time as a couple. It'll be less troublesome. Fabio seemed startled and immediately interrupted. Doctor? The doctor paused, then quickly realized, sorry, I didn't know your husband hadn't told you. I lowered my eyelashes. I already know. After the doctor left, Fabio stood beside me. I looked into his eyes, but there was no emotion in mine. He gently covered my eyes, speaking in pain. Please, I'd rather you hit or scold me than look at me like that. Please. You'll have more children. I'll find the best doctor to treat you. I scoffed. I had heard these words too many times to feel anything anymore. I didn't want to keep hoping. I blinked, my eyelashes brushing against his palm, and said firmly, Fabio, I don't want you anymore. His hand trembled as it covered my eyes. He froze, then asked in disbelief, What did you say? I said I don't want you anymore. I mechanically averted my gaze and stared at him emptily. You don't deserve my love. He gasped for air, unable to accept it, his voice growing angry. Are you really going to leave me for this? We can have more children. Your health can be restored. If you don't like Sofia, I'll never see her again. I'll do whatever you want. What else do you want? I frowned and looked at him, my gaze unwavering as I stared into his eyes. What about all the suffering I've gone through? When you had to choose, how could you choose that? When I called you, why didn't you answer? I am your wife. You kept checking on Sofia's safety, but never gave me a single word of concern. When I was humiliated to the point of miscarriage, where were you? When I was being killed, where were you? You never truly loved me. Fabio, touch your heart. It was you who gave up on me first. He stumbled backward, shaking his head repeatedly, unable to accept what I said. I didn't give up on you. I did think of you at the time, but it's just... I stared at him. Just what? Just that your assistant spoke before you could. But what's the difference between your assistant's words and yours? He suddenly raised his head and retorted hysterically.
No.
That's not it. At that time, I truly wanted to save you too. I wanted to save Sofia first because she grew up with me, but I didn't want to give up on you. Not choosing you was because I didn't want the kidnappers to think you were important, so they would guard you too closely. I wanted to lower his guard to save you. Ferdinanda, believe me. By the end of his speech, he was rambling incoherently and quickly walked toward me as if to hug me. I smiled bitterly. Fabio, I'm your wife, and yet you chose her time and time again, never once making an exception. I took a deep breath and pushed him away fiercely. I can't endure this anymore. Fabio, we're done. He froze. But then he suddenly grabbed my hand. Ferdinanda, forgive me. Didn't you say you wanted to see the northern lights? We'll go as soon as you're discharged. I laughed coldly. It's too late for all of this, Fabio. Things have come to this point. No matter how you feel, it doesn't matter anymore. After that, Fabio didn't come to see me for many days. During the day, Fabio investigated the kidnapping case, and at night he stayed outside my room watching over me. The mental pressure became overwhelming, and after witnessing the kidnapper's nonchalant attitude again, he couldn't hold himself back and threw a punch. I was sitting nearby, listening to the sounds from inside. Then Fabio came out. You're free now. He lowered his head despondently. Do you want me to be arrested? I blinked. I just want you to give me justice. He forced a smile. Okay. The next day, he kept his promise and brought Sofia and his assistant to see me. The assistant looked defeated and followed Fabio into the room. Sofia was still calling Fabio brother, begging him to let go. As soon as she saw me and the assistant, her expression immediately stiffened. What's going on? Why did you bring me to see them? Fabio shoved her forward, and she fell to the ground, looking nothing like her pristine self. Will you confess yourself, or should I expose you? Fabio's voice was sharp and unyielding, and Sofia trembled on the floor. She remained silent, but I wasn't in a rush. I turned to the assistant. And you? Why are you here? The assistant was shaking, and Fabio shot him a glance. The assistant immediately knelt down, his head hitting the floor in a desperate plea. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been so foolish. Sofia instructed me to retaliate against your wife, claiming she was disliked and that Fabio loved her instead. Sofia told me your wife was disliked, and that Fabian loved her, not you. She said once she got what she wanted, she'd have Fabio give me the position of general manager of a subsidiary. I'm sorry, I truly am. I didn't mean it. Fabio looked at Sofia. The rest you can say yourself. Sofia remained silent, her expression unreadable. Fabio sneered. Fine, if you won't speak. I have evidence. With that, the computer played the kidnapper's video. It's that woman Sofia. After talking to Fabio on the phone, she told me she was the one Fabio loved. She struck a deal with me saying that if I humiliated Fabio's wife, she would make sure I'd be fine. I didn't know she was pregnant. I wouldn't have done something so despicable. But Sofia definitely knew, and she did it on purpose. After the video ended, Fabio threw the USB drive beside Sofia. Sofia still refused to back down. With a sudden fierce gesture, she pointed at him. I didn't do anything. Brother, you've been bewitched by her. I'm the one you love the most. Fabio looked at me and said softly, yes, I did love you. But that was in the past. Now all my love belongs to Ferdinanda. I have no love left for anyone else. Sofia collapsed, her voice shrill with hysteria. What do you mean? When my family had money, you loved me. But now that we have nothing, you don't love me anymore? Your love really is cheap. She laughed maniacally as if she wanted to skin me alive. You're just a vile woman. You think I love you, Fabio? Humph. Don't delude yourself. I only care about money. All I want is money. I have no money. I can't complete my studies. I can't endure poverty. Fabio, I never loved you. I just wanted your money. As her schemes were exposed, she stopped pretending. As she spoke, her tears started to flow. I don't want love. What use is love? Love is the most useless thing in the world. Yes, love really is the most useless thing in the world. All of Fabio's efforts to stage this scene, thinking it would make me forgive him, were merely the explanation I deserved. Fabio looked at me with pleading eyes. I spoke softly. Don't you realize? I looked up at Fabio. But the harm done to me, it all stems from how you treated me. Fabio's eyes flickered, and in the end, he lowered his gaze. I ran away. On a day when Fabio didn't come to the hospital, I handled my discharge procedures alone and fled to a place he'd never expect. Fabio panicked. News outlets were flooded with reports about searching for me. The notoriously reclusive Fabio even appeared on my favorite TV program, begging me to return. His social media, usually silent, was abruptly updated with a single photo, empty wine bottles strewn across the floor. It was a trick he'd used before, hurting himself to make me feel sorry for him. In the past, I had a soft heart and loved him. But now, after having died once, I have let go of all that. I turned off the TV and pulled the blanket around me. A young nurse from the sanatorium entered with a glass of water. She hesitated for a long while before speaking. Miss Ferdinanda, would you like me to tell Mr. Fabio you're here? He's been looking for you and drinking heavily. I heard he's always had stomach problems. Yes, he had stomach problems, so I had learned to make all those dishes that were good for his health. But what did he do? He threw them all away. I looked at the inexperienced young nurse with pity and patted her head. His stomach issues are his own. Pitying men brings a lifetime of misfortune. She blushed and quickly tried to explain. No, but Miss Ferdinanda, your prepaid funds are nearly depleted. I overheard the director say they're about to discharge you. So what if they discharge me? I'll just leave. No big deal, I thought to myself. But the director thought otherwise. He wanted money, so he secretly contacted Fabio. That day, I was sitting on the green lawn of the sanatorium, gazing into the distance when footsteps suddenly sounded behind me. Without turning, I spoke. You came? Fabio, as if granted a pardon, rushed to my side. Have you forgiven me? I smiled faintly. No, but I knew you'd come eventually. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in a long time. After a long silence, he finally spoke. But without me, how would you survive? If it weren't for you, I might still be teaching piano. He stood up and stared at my hands, a single tear abruptly falling. I'm sorry. When the rock fell, I instinctively raised my hands to shield myself. My hands were already ruined by then. The once renowned piano queen had lost her hands and was no different than a useless person. He asked me, You really can't forgive me? I averted my gaze, unwilling to even look at him. He trembled, as if abandoned by the entire world. Fine, I'll divorce you. We'll split everything equally. I clenched my fist. This was the best outcome I could have hoped for. We divorced quickly, and a large sum of money came into my account. Fabio also wanted to transfer property to me, but I demanded he liquidate all assets into cash. The clinic I stayed at was far away from the city, and Fabio would email me. I had blocked all other means of contact with him. In his emails, he mentioned that the kidnapper had been imprisoned, though he had had someone take care of him. Now he was half dead in prison, being abused. He had tried to end his life several times, but all attempts failed, driving him completely insane. As for the assistant, since he wanted to leave for another company, Fabio sent him to their African partner's firm. There had been no news since. Who knew what had happened to him? Sofia? Fabio didn't care for her. She fell into decadence, trading her body for quick money. She died from a difficult childbirth in the operating room. I looked at each of those emails and blocked his account too. Since the evildoers had received their just desserts, I was ready to move on. Once my health improved, I traveled the world with the money I had. I even went to see the Aurora Borealis, the trip Fabio had promised me countless times but never delivered. After returning from the Aurora, I received a piece of news. Fabio was diagnosed with stomach cancer, a consequence of not taking care of himself. One of his subordinates reached out to ask me to visit him, saying he was burning with fever and delirious, calling my name. But what was the use? I had already moved on. The only one still hanging on was him. I held the boarding pass for my next flight in my hand, my heart as calm as still water. Perhaps I should thank him. His abandonment made me realize I was already deep in the mire.